Ebrahim Raisi was sworn in this week as Iran's 8th president. The change in Tehran's leadership comes amid uncertainty surrounding the future of the 2015 nuclear deal. Iran's President Raisi says he would support any diplomatic plan aimed at ending sanctions against the regime. U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price Thursday also expressing interest in returning to the table to continue nuclear talks. All this amid rising tension in the Gulf as Iran is believed to have attacked one oil tanker last week and seized another on Tuesday. So what impact does Tehran's change in leadership have on U.S. relations with the regime? Joining us now is Behnam Taleblu. He's a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Welcome. Good to see you. So let's tell our viewers what we know about Iran's new president.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you again. In short, Ebrahim Raisi, 60 years old, is yet another cleric who has been selected, not elected, you could say, to become the next president of the Islamic Republic and is currently serving in that role. He has a blood-stained past. He was on a death commission in the late 1980s that oversaw the implementation of 2 fatwas that killed upwards of 4,000 or 5,000 political prisoners in Tehran. This man was actually promoted multiple times across the Iranian judiciary. He was sanctioned in 2019 by the Trump administration. And he makes history now not only by being the first person in Iranian history to lateral from the judiciary to the presidency, but he's the first Iranian president to enter office while under U.S. sanctions.
Okay, and the United States has shown no sign yet that they're willing to lift those sanctions against him, or do you suspect that that will happen?
I do have fears, of course. The Iranian press twice earlier this summer has reported that the executive order, which was issued by the Trump administration in 2019, which is a far-reaching order that goes after anyone appointed to a position of prominence or official authority in Iran by Khamenei or Khamenei's inner circle or working in Khamenei's office, and Khamenei being the supreme leader of that country, by the way, can be subject to sanctions. And this is the authority under which Raisi is sanctioned. On 2 different occasions earlier this summer, the Iranian press has reported from Iranian government sources that the U.S. had wink, wink, nudge, nudge, been okay with the full repealing of this order, which would mean the delifting of sanctions on someone like Raisi. This would be a horrible moral and strategic mistake for the U.S., not just vis-a-vis negotiating with Iran, but other rogue regimes where we actually have a concert, not conflict, between U.S. strategy and U.S. values.
What has Raisi been saying about the nuclear deal, beyond the fact that he wants sanctions lifted, of course? But what kind of accommodation or concession, if any, has he shown himself willing to make? For example, would he be willing to put any restrictions on Iran's ballistic missile development, which is not in the original deal, or, for example, its support for proxy militias elsewhere in the region?
Most unfortunately not. You know, traditionally, Iran's hard-right, ultra-hardline flank denigrates the JCPOA, and that is the kind of factional balance or factional milieu that Raisi has arisen out of. But Raisi has expressed support, actually, for trying to resurrect the deal, likely because he knows the dividends, the material, the economic dividends that that deal could provide the Islamic Republic. Lest we forget, that is a fast-expiring and, as we know, fatally flawed nuclear agreement. But beyond that, of course, Raisi's administration is likely not to be filled by technocrats but fellow hardliners, and they are more inclined than ever to press the pedal to the metal and escalate. And rather than merely resurrect the JCPOA, my fear is that they may try to get more and offer less than what was in that fatally flawed agreement. There is also, of course, the chance that Iran is so comfortable with escalation now, thinking it has outlasted the Trump administration's maximum pressure policy and being thoroughly unimpressed by the shall we say, as my colleague has said, the maximum deference policy of the Biden administration, where sanctions are not being enforced, actually, then, of course, they think that they can outlast this, and they may escalate further and further, and they may be tempted to cross red lines and potentially even weaponize.
So when you, what do you make of the oil tanker seizures? The U.S. Publicly rebuked Iran for them, blamed them, as did the U.K. Is this part of a strategy designed to get more concessions from the U.S.? And how does that make sense?
Well, ultimately, the tit-for-tat that you're seeing in the maritime domain, some of Iran's attacks of Israeli-owned shipping vessels, for instance, is part of this larger shadow war between the Iranians and the Israelis. This is seen on multiple fronts, on land, in places like Syria, for instance, in the cyber domain against each other's critical infrastructure, and at sea against some of these tankers. But lest we forget, Israel is not the one who started this. The Islamic Republic has been doing this ever since the 1980s. We all remember the tanker war in the Persian Gulf and Strait of Hormuz. And then, of course, more recently, starting in 2019, Iran started mining this area. Iran is a threat to international trade and security. And in fact, today you had a statement by, I believe, the G7 foreign ministers condemning this Iranian drone attack, which again is designed to signal resolve and defiance.
All right, Behnam Ben Taleblu, we'll see where the negotiations go.